We have already discussed what is link. Now let us see the slider crank mechanism. You can see in the figure, this is a slider crank mechanism. It has four links. Number one, crank. Number two, connecting rod. Number three, piston. Number four, cylinder. So this has been represented like this. You will find this mechanism mostly in the diesel engine, petrol engine, steam engine. Now when the crank rotates, here in the figure we have shown it is rotating in clockwise direction. Now when the crank rotates, it will pull connecting rod, and the connecting rod is connected to the piston, so it will give the piston a to and fro motion, and the piston will slide inside the cylinder, which is shown by the number 4. So this is a slider crank mechanism, simple mechanism. Next is types of links. Now there are three types of links. Number one, rigid link. Number two, flexible link. Number three, fluid link. Rigid link. It does not undergo any deformation while transmitting motion, as for example crank, connecting rod, and piston, etc. They are considered rigid link because while transmitting motion, they undergo little deformation. Flexible link. This type of link is partially deformed while transmitting motion, as for example springs, belts, ropes, etc. Now when you see a spring or a belt, you will see that it undergoes little bit of extension and contraction while transmitting motion. So that is why these are known as flexible link. মানে যেতিয়া motion transmit কৰে এই spring বিলাক আৰু belt বিলাক সিহঁতৰ motion contraction হয় কেতিয়াবা expansion হয়, so এই কাৰণে ইহঁতক flexible link বুলি কয়. Fluid link. Motion is transmitted through this link as in the case of hydraulic brake, hydraulic press, etc. So when you see a hydraulic brake or hydraulic press, you will see that inside these devices you will find hydraulic liquid. Now this hydraulic liquid acts as a link. So when গতিকে fluid linkত আমি কি পাম, fluidটোৱে এটা লিংক হিচাপে কাম কৰে। যেতিয়া হাইড্ৰলিক ব্ৰেকছ লাগে, হাইড্ৰলিক প্ৰেছ থাকে, এইবিলাকত ইয়াতে কিছুমান হাইড্ৰলিক লিকুইড সোমোৱা থাকে, এই হাইড্ৰলিক লিকুইডবিলাকে এজ এ লিংক কাম কৰে। চ' যেতিয়া আমি হাইড্ৰলিক ব্ৰেকটো প্ৰেছ কৰোঁ, সেই মোশ্যনটো এই লিকুইডৰ থ্ৰুৱেদি হৈ যায়। Kinematic pair. It has two elements or links joined together which have relative motion between them. The motion between the links is completely or successfully constrained. So when you have two elements or links or members joined together and there is relative motion between these two links, then you will find a kinematic pair. Another important characteristic is that the motion between the links is completely or successfully constrained. That means the motion takes place in a particular direction only. So that is what it is meant by the motion between the links is completely or successfully constrained. গতিকে কাইনেটিক পেয়াৰ হ'ল দুটা লিংক আমি যেতিয়া জইন কৰোঁ তেতিয়া আমি কাইনেটিক পেয়াৰ পাওঁ, আৰু কাইনেটিক পেয়াৰত ৰিলেটিভ মোশ্যন থাকে, মানে ডিফাৰেন্স ইন মোশ্যন, আৰু ইহঁতৰ মোশ্যনটো কমপ্লিটলি আৰু ছাকচেছফুলি কনষ্টেণ্ট হয়, মিনছ মোশ্যনটো এটা পাৰ্টিকুলাৰ ডিৰেকশ্যনতে মুভ কৰিব। Classification of kinematic pairs. Kinematic pairs can be classified on the basis of number A, type of contact, number B, type of constraint, number C, type of relative motion. Type of contact, lower pair. If a pair in motion has a surface contact between its elements, it is called a lower pair. The contact surfaces of the two elements are alike. Examples: shaft rotating in a bearing, piston reciprocating in a cylinder. In a lower pair, you will find that the two elements are having surface contact, means they are having surface to surface contact. Here we have given two examples. Number one example is a shaft rotating in a bearing, which is shown in the figure 1. You will see that there is a shaft and this shaft goes through a bearing. So inner surface of the bearing and the outer surface of the shaft are alike and they are having surface contact. And the second example is for piston reciprocating in a cylinder. If you imagine a piston reciprocating in a cylinder, you will find that the outer surface of the piston and the inner surface of the cylinder are having surface contact. গতিকে আমি লোৱাৰ পেয়াৰত কি পাওঁ যে দুটা এলিমেন্টছৰ মাজত সাৰফেস কন্টাক্ট থাকে, সাৰফেস টু সাৰফেস কন্টাক্ট থাকে। দুটা এক্সাম্পল আমি ইয়াত দিছো, shaft rotating in a bearing, এডাল shaft bearingত rotate কৰি আছে, আৰু piston reciprocating in a cylinder, আৰু এটা piston এটা cylinder ভিতৰত reciprocate কৰি আছে। Higher pair. In a higher pair, there is line or point contact between the elements. The contact surfaces are not alike. Examples: cam and follower, ball and roller bearings. So in a higher pair, you will find line or point contact, and surfaces in contact are not alike. In the figure, you will see a cam and follower. The cam and follower are having point contact. So higher paired আমি যিবিলাক এলিমেন্টস পাম সেই এলিমেন্টস বিলাকক পইণ্ট কন্টেক্ট থাকিব আৰু সাৰফেসেস বিলাক সেম নাথাকে। the surfaces are not alike, ইহঁতৰ এইটোৱে ক্যাৰেক্টাৰিষ্টিক থাকে। আমি এটা কেম এণ্ড ফলোৱাৰ যিটো এক্সাম্পল দেখিলো ফিগাৰ নম্বৰ 2, ইয়াতে দেখিছো যে ইটস এ নাইফ এজ ফলোৱাৰ আৰু কেমটো হ'ল সিম্পল কেম, ইহঁতৰ মাজত পইণ্ট কন্টেক্ট আছে আৰু ইহঁতৰ সাৰফেস কিটা সেম নহয়। Depending on the type of constraint, pairs can be divided into two groups, closed pair and unclosed pair. Now coming to the closed pair, if the elements of the pair are held together mechanically, they constitute a closed pair. Generally, all the lower pairs are considered as closed pair because in lower pairs, the elements are in surface to surface contact. That means there should be some mechanical element which will bind those elements together. Those pair দুটা এলিমেন্ট বা দুটা মেম্বাৰ আমি মেকানিক্যালি হেল্ড কৰি ৰাখো, দুটা মেকানিক্যালি আমি বান্ধি ৰাখো। গতিকে এক্সাম্পলত আহিল অল দ্য লোৱাৰ পেয়াৰ্স, যিকোনো ধৰণৰ লোৱাৰ পেয়াৰ বিলাককে আমি ক্লোজ পেয়াৰ বুলি ক'ব পাৰোঁ। আনক্লোজ পেয়াৰ, when the two elements are not held together mechanically, it forms an unclosed pair. The two elements are connected together by gravity or spring force. So in unclosed pair, what we see that they are not held together mechanically. In unclosed pair, the elements are held together by gravity or spring force. One of the example of unclosed pair could be cam and follower. So we'll see the figure. In the figure 1, we can see closed pair. A square bar is moving through a square hole, and if you see the surfaces, you can recognize them as the lower pair because they are having surface contact. As per definition, all the lower pairs are closed pairs, and when there is a closed pair, they are held mechanically together. So here you can see these two elements are held together mechanically. Some mechanical force is there to hold these elements together. You can see unclosed pair in figure number 2, and it's a cam and follower arrangement, and these are held together by gravity only. So as per definition, in an unclosed pair, the elements are not held together by some mechanical force, they are held together by spring or gravity. Types of relative motion. Sliding pair, the two elements have a sliding motion relative to each other. Example: piston and cylinder pair, rectangular rod in a rectangular hole. গতিকে sliding pair কি হ'ল, the two elements have a sliding motion. That means one element slides over the other one. Examples could be piston and cylinder pair. If you have seen a piston inside a cylinder which is reciprocating, you will see that this piston is having sliding motion. Then another example could be rectangular rod in a rectangular hole. So when we push a rectangular rod through a rectangular hole, then it will form a sliding pair. So figure 1 is showing the sliding pair. Turning pair, when two elements are connected such that one element revolves around the other, it forms a turning pair. Examples: shaft rotating in a bearing, rotation of crank in a slider crank mechanism. So in the figure 2, you will be seeing this dark figure. A shaft is rotating in a bearing, so it is forming turning pair. The other example is the rotation of crank in a slider crank mechanism. Rolling pair, when one element is free to roll on the other, it forms a rolling pair. Motion of a rolling wheel on a flat surface in a belt drive pulley can be considered as rolling on belt, or you can consider a wheel rolling on a flat surface. Screw pair. In this type of pair, the contacting surfaces are having threads. This is also known as helical pair. The examples, a bolt and nut arrangement. So in case of screw pair, you will find threads and screw and nut arrangement is one example. Spherical pair. A ball and socket joint forms a spherical pair. One element is in the form of a sphere and turns about the fixed element. Here in the figure you can see a spherical pair. And here you can see a ball which is inside a socket, so they form a spherical pair. Now there are other examples of spherical pair also. If you remember the scroll mouse which we used to use in the past for computers, then you will see that a ball moves inside a sphere. So that was spherical pair. Now again you can find this kind of spherical pair in the side mirror of the cars, which are manually controlled mostly. If you see a manually controlled side mirror of a car, then you will see that inner side of the car you will find a lever. If you move that lever, you can adjust the mirror. So that mechanism is based on the spherical pair. Constraint motions. Constraint means limitation. Constraint motion means limitation on motion or action. Constraint motion is of three types. Number one, completely constrained motion. This motion is in a definite direction, as for example, square bar moving in a square hole. So when you push a square bar through a square hole, it will move in to and fro direction only. So it has a definite direction of motion. So that is why the motion of that bar is incompletely constrained motion. This type of motion takes place in more than one direction. Example, a circular bar through a circular hole. So when you put a circular bar through a circular hole, it is having two motions. Number one motion is rotary, that means it will tend to rotate. Number two is reciprocating, successfully constrained motion. This motion is not completed by itself but by some other means. Example, the motion of piston inside the cylinder is not completed by itself but due to the rotation of the crank. That means when the piston reciprocates inside the cylinder, you have to connect that piston with some connecting rod. Then this connecting rod will be connected to some crank. So crank has to rotate, then only the connecting rod can pull and push this piston inside the cylinder. So the piston takes the help of the crank. Without that, the motion cannot complete. Kinematic chain. A kinematic chain is the combination of kinematic pairs joined in such a way that the relative motion between them is completely constrained. So in case of a kinematic chain, it should be combination of kinematic pairs and they should be combined. All these kinematic pairs should be combined in such a way that the relative motion between them is completely constrained. That means the relative motion should take place in a constrained direction. That means in a definite direction. So important points here to remember are kinematic pairs. Kinematic chain consists of kinematic pairs and it's a combination of kinematic pairs actually. Now next point is the relative motion between kinematic pairs is completely constrained. Relative motion takes place in a definite direction.